Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Forbes Middle East welcomes you all to Finruption in Focus, where the regions, leaders, regulators, and end users have all come together today to delve into the disruption, opportunities, and challenges that new technology is bringing to the financial sector. The war on cash and why M-wallets are catching up. On the next panel, answer these questions. Please help me welcome our next panel of speakers, starting with the founder and CEO of Beam Wallet, Mr. Serdar Nurmammedov. Mr. Serdar has always been fascinated by the concept of money and the multiple perspectives of living in 4 countries have fulfilled his vision for Beam. Serdar was a business analyst for 9 years before starting Beam. Next in line, I would like to welcome to the stage the Chief Innovation Officer at RAKBANK, Mr. Alberto Diez. Mr. Alberto is responsible for managing the bank's digital transformation strategy and introducing a portfolio of bank-wide innovative solutions and initiatives. He is also leading the setup and execution of the RAKBANK Innovation Accelerator Labs. Next in line, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage the Vice President of Digital Payments and Labs at MasterCard, Mr. Pankaj Asthana. Mr. Pankaj has been involved in the fintech community and efforts to explore the applicability of blockchain and open banking, amongst other concepts. Next in line, please help me welcome to the stage Associate Professor and Head of Academics for School of IT Skyline at University College, Dr. Deepak Kalra. Dr. Deepak holds a PhD in management and has more than 20 years of experience in the industry and teaching experience. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage the moderator for this panel, Mr. Joseph Mazloum. Mr. Joseph is principal of Booz Allen Hamilton. Joseph is a leader in the financial services practice and draws more than 13 years of strategy and management consulting to advise clients on building a competitive edge through adequate adoption of innovation within the financial services.
So, first to start this panel, we hear a lot about digital, cashless, wallet, e-wallet, M-wallet. I think it would be good to just do some level setting here and understand what those terms mean in the context of your respective industries. Maybe Alberto, we can start with the banker and look at the breadth of those services offerings, what this means in the context of a bank that's trying to innovate.
All right. Thank you. When it comes to kind of war on cash, from a banking perspective, we tend to kind of split it up into a couple of layers before we even come down to M-wallets. The first layer would be we don't want people to even go into stores. So, for example, we are one of the biggest SME banks in the region. So, we work a lot with making sure that our SMEs have the opportunity of being able to set up e-commerce, right? Set up their own websites, sell things online, so that they don't even have to go into the stores. And by doing that, reducing cash. Yeah. Next level under that, we're working with smart point of sales. Similar to some of the fintechs in Europe, looking at how can we do point of sales, literally the machine that SMEs use, cheaper. So we've released a point of sale that is kind of mobile phone size, that 1/3 of cost, which literally means that earlier, if you didn't take card payments, now you can, because it's cheaper, right? So then we kind of go even further down in the funnel of kind of war on cash. And then you come down to the wallets. And for us, I see it as two streams. One stream is wallets that are improving cumbersome stuff, yeah, and I'll give you an example of that. And another segment that helps a certain percentage of the population that is more cash prone to switch to wallets, yeah. And the first one, the kind of cumbersome tasks wallet, we recently launched an app, or it is a wallet, that is trying to capture the schools of UAE. Yeah. So, for example, there's a lot of cash going into maybe not paying terms fees, but paying for your transportation to school, your kids, canteen. It can be anything to like consent forms and so on. And we're doing a little bit of an ecosystem around that. So literally, helping people overcome cumbersome tasks, wallets, and by doing that, reducing cash. Yeah. And then the absolute last one, and sorry for this very extensive answer, the last one is we're engaged in the Emirates Digital Wallet initiatives that bring 15 banks together, literally trying to run it almost as a digital banking light, where, back to our earlier point around the percentage of people that use cash more than others, maybe get paid in cash and just use that cash, have a way of, onboarding an account that is actually a wallet that then, because of our relationship, works in 45,000 merchants. That's kind of the structure down that we see in regards to kind of war on cash from a banking perspective.
Thank you. Pankaj, maybe from MasterCard, very incumbent and larger, one of the largest issuers, how do you deal with this war on cash, and is it a threat to the core business of MasterCard?
Yeah, thanks. So firstly, we're not issuers, we're basically a payment scheme. So we don't issue the cards, but if I, for the audience, was to sort of simplify the definition of wallets, we'd sort of take two major things that a wallet does. One is they are providing financial services. They're making easy access possible for financial services. That's one important element. Now, it could be offered by a bank, like the examples Alberto just mentioned, that the bank is actually making a wallet. It could be made by a fintech, which is completely dedicated to the purpose of making a wallet, like Beam, and Serdar would be talking more about it. It could be a government trying to create a national wallet, like, again, Alberto mentioned, with the Emirates Digital Wallet. And it could also be one of these fintech giants, like the Apples and Samsungs of the world, who are saying, hey guys, I already have these customers. I give a lot of value to them anyways. And can I start enriching them with further financial services? So the first element of a wallet, the way we define it, is that there is an element of some financial service or value that you are providing to a captive user base. That's number one. Number two, which I think is slightly variable, is who holds the deposits? Is it going to be held by the same person or by the same entity or by someone else? And I think for the purpose of this discussion, I think we should be looking at wallets where the operator may or may not be holding the funds. So it could be an Apple Pay-like model where you're basically just storing other parties' funds, or a Beam-like model where you're holding other people's, bank account cards, etc. Or it could also be, someone offering their own wallet where they're actually inviting the storage of funds. So I think that would be a good framework to look at and define wallets.
And what are the key trends that you're observing here in this market being imported to the UAE or the broader MENA region?
So let me start with UAE first. I think it's a very exciting market because there is a massive appetite to experiment. And we had some very interesting people speaking about this before us. I heard about, Sonny from Standard Chartered Bank talking about the need to be agile and experiment, and I think that's something we're seeing the banks doing experiment. And Namish had a point that, we should be experimenting for the sake of experimenting on a few things. So yes, there is use case driven innovation, but there's also innovation driven around, let's just try the technology, the 3M or the DuPont way of innovation as it used to be. UAE, we are seeing a lot of all of it. So interestingly, again, if you think about the way Alberto just opened the discussion, you've got government trying a wallet, you've got banks creating their own wallets, you've got private players creating wallets, and you have global fintechs and giants also offering wallets. So it's a very rich and very experimenting environment in UAE right now.
Okay, great. Now I'd like to move to Serdar. So Serdar, with Beam, you have a different vision for payments in the long term. I think at Beam you've coined a phrase. You say that each payment has a story. Okay. Yeah. I'd like you to tell us, to share your vision of payments, you have a rather disruptive view, and how you intend to compete against other initiatives such as EDW that are state-sponsored, that have onboarded lots of incumbents and major players in the economy.
So when it comes to payments, let's start with war on cash, or why cash is a problem in the first place. I think that's important to understand. It may be a problem that's for a government, or that we have a vision that we need to eliminate cash and go digital. That's a good, let's say, vision or strategy. But then how do you convince people, or how do you accelerate that to happen? And I think that's, from our experience, you have to solve a problem for someone. So whatever you can promote, whatever you can say, doesn't cut it in a way. So the way we look at it is that the one who suffers most from cash economy, or the fact that cash exists, are the retailers, because cash leaves no trace. And when there is no trace, and retail is a business that could be optimized a lot more if everything was, let's say, digitized, or every transaction was recorded. The way we look at it is that, and also we need to take the discussion away from just saying how do we get rid of cash into more of a what is a payment. So when you think about what a payment is, and in today's world, there's all payments, marketing, loyalty, these type of things are all, or the entire value chain, they're all converging into one thing. It's becoming one experience. A simple example is if I go to Costa Coffee and I buy a bottle of Mount Franklin or Coca-Cola, in the current frame is that I paid Costa Coffee $5 and that's it. Transaction is over. They know it came either with a Visa scheme or a MasterCard scheme, and that's as far as that relationship goes. But in reality, as a customer, I am someone. I am either a millennial or a couple or a tourist, and on the other hand, I buy a product, a waiter serves me, and that product that was delivered to me has, I trigger an entire ecosystem. So many people worked really hard to make that happen, including the shopping center, the store, the distribution network, the brand, the manufacturer, and so on. And today the problem is, except the cashier who took my order, they have no idea of who I am, and even they don't know who I am really. So I think the biggest driver that we can use to get away from cash would be providing optimization to the retailers using data, and this is where I think the better value there. So, and that means we need to use the SKU level item. We need to go away from just fulfilling a payment function into bringing all those stakeholders together into that journey, so that if I want to provide feedback to Coca-Cola, or if I want to provide feedback to the store owner or to the shopping center, etc., I should be able to do it right at the end of that transaction, and they should have that in real time.
Okay, thank you. Now, we hear about all those great technologies that are coming up, whether from fintech startups or from very well-established players. Dr. Deepak, maybe a bit on the technology side, what are the latest technologies that will empower and that will make all those offerings possible to the customer, to the regular customer?
I hope I'm audible. The technologies behind it is, like, there are many technologies which are running behind this e-wallet and all the other things, like we learned from the previous panel about the blockchain and other things. But if you go behind those technologies, why these technologies are there? We want to go ahead with automation. So we have something called robotic process automation. We have artificial intelligence. Now, all those technologies are powered by machine learning. Now, Now the data which is being thrown from e-wallet, which is being thrown from the, like technically I'll go in for the academic and then the question I will ask from Pankaj, that the data which is being thrown, now from that data, a lot of learning can be done. And these learning can infuse efficiencies, and these efficiencies can reduce it can change the paradigm of a bank or a e-wallet company to be people-oriented, to be process-oriented, transform from people-oriented to process-oriented, and ultimately going for click-based. Why to have a RAKBANK? Why to have a Emirates NBD Bank? Why not we have a digital RAKBANK, digital Emirates NBD Bank? Why we need to go to a location, ATM counters, physically go over there when all those technologies are there? So technically speaking, all those things can be reduced. They can go in for a thin line and be global companies, provided they infuse those efficiencies and use the machine learning algorithms to do the job from the data which is coming up.
On that note, Alberto, do you foresee a branchless bank?
I think branches actually fulfill quite a key business case. And maybe not when you look at individual kind of wallet technologies or something like that, but within a bank ecosystem, we see branches as an enabler for digital adaptation. We see it as an enabler for certain products. You know, people will still want to go in and speak to someone if I'm going to buy a house, for example, right? So depending on what products we're speaking about, the branch, and the same with, for example, business banking, you're doing big transactions, and you know, there is certain products that require more branches. However, the gist of us is we obviously want to leverage technologies to make the experience in a branch more seamless, right? If we can do half of the things that people go into the bank now, if we can do that on our app, you know, that means that we can free up the right type of people to support our customers in the most important things. And maybe in the future have less of, I don't know, tellers that just, you know, bring in cash to your account, and maybe more advisors and specialists in the areas that are a little bit harder to grasp.
And even at some point, there's the robo-advisory, whereby machine AI could perform some of those roles, and I think some experiments have already been conducted. Can you elaborate? Do you want to elaborate a bit on that?
I'll elaborate on that. The things are like, there's a thing called like process automation every bank does. Every organization does, that they need to transform their processes to match the needs of the market and the use cases which were discussed earlier. That is done. Now behind that, now once you do it, now the data that is there with you, you people are sitting on such a big amount of data. And here is the competition which you as a banks or a financial institution you face with the technical organizations. Like you are discussing about fintech. Now these technical organizations don't discuss about fintech. They say techfin. They are technology leverage companies which are sitting on a customer base and using the smartphone technology because people are users of them. They will be able to leverage the things in a much faster way and much secured way, which a bank, because that is not your primary domain. It's not your primary value chain activity. So that is the part where you people will face a big challenge as far as the organizations are there, the financial institutions are there. So techfin firms are going to take, this is just a prediction, it may be wrong, but they are going to take a advantage over here as far as the normal banking institutions are there. So there they have to worry about that whether technologies which can be infused, because they're already customer-facing organizations, where through the electronic way they are interacting with the customers. And for them, they have to tweak the processes at the back end. They are getting the data, they are using like Amazon. They use a lot of machine learning algorithms, where as a bank, they need to learn. They are right now discussing about use cases, where they have already implemented it. So here is the, we say, first mover advantage with techfin firms have rather than fintech firms.
Very interesting perspective, thank you. Hearing all that, I think a very interesting case study is WeChat in China, where on this app you can do basically everything, right? You can invest, you can take loans, you can conduct transactions, peer-to-peer transactions, etc. And that's an open question to the panelists. Will we see such an application, such a platform in the region here? And maybe in the UAE, given that Dubai, as you said, is prone to the innovations, those innovations. Pankaj?
So, I mean, nothing stops it. So that's, I think, a credit to the financial ecosystem here, to the regulators and others. The big question is, for that solution to work here, it again comes down to the same two basics. What are the financial services and other services being offered through the platform? What's the real need, that the market is feeling? Are you ending up creating a delta that current solutions not providing? So that's layer number one. And layer number two is, are they allowed to hold funds like they are in China? And what are the governing framework around that? Now, nothing stops such a solution to come into the UAE market. So the short answer would be, it's possible. The nuance and the details would be, what is that added value and the value creation that's happening. And I would just link back to what Dr. Kalra was mentioning. Personally, I think the banks and ourselves as financial institutions are actually welcoming the coming of fintechs or tech fins, whatever way you want to call them, because what's happening is primarily the war is on cash. Even a market like UAE, 70% of retail spends continue to be cash, if I look at transactions. I'm not talking about value. What we are facing right now is that there is a gap in the kind of experiences the consumers would need for them to migrate. And when we talk about consumers, exactly to Alberto's point, we're not only talking about retail consumers like ourselves, but also businesses, small businesses. So, there is an opportunity. Players who can solve the problem of giving better services are most welcome. Just remember that when WeChat came up in China, it was a market with a very low interest regime. And exactly to your point, the bank's innovation on financial services hadn't really kept pace. Now, along comes this chatting platform where I could also start keeping money in a way. And then I could, start investing my money into funds and everything else where I actually got better returns. So suddenly in China, there was a setting where, by keeping money in a wallet, I was getting better returns plus great value and services, right? So I don't know how easily replicable that is in every market, but I think it's a good starting point that in UAE, there is nothing that stops us from having such a player in the market.
Alberto?
Yeah, can I just add, sorry. There's multiple of these wallets globally that are successful. And normally it's about adoption, right? And for us to come to that point, there almost needs to be a little bit of, I wouldn't call it regulation, but it needs to be a choice, right? You can look at successful digital onboarding in Europe, and the most successful one are the ones that have, say, for example, a bank ID, and they say, everybody go this way. And then all investments go in that way, right? Same with WeChat. You come to a point when it becomes the chat. Everybody's hooking into it, right? And different people leverage it for different things, and it becomes an ecosystem that is almost like open source software, right? Everybody adds value to it, and then it becomes impossible to even compete with because everybody's driving value. The situation here is the opposite, where people pick up wallets or technology and run them for the sake of technology, hook it into 3 random government units, and hope that that will then grow, which is not true, right? So that's, that's literally where I can see, will we get there or not? It needs a bit of a policy, regulation, and a little bit people coming together to come into that type of leveraged model.
I pretty much agree with everything you said just now, except the regulatory effect, whether that can have an impact or not, because I think there has to be something else that pushes it.
Yeah.
So, and I would like to also add something else to the WeChat and Alipay discussion as well, is that they were almost at an advantage compared to other markets, such as the Western markets, etc., because they went from cash to mobile. So they didn't have the intermediary step of having a bank system / a card infrastructure system that somehow, let's say, we build dependencies around. the way I look at cards is that, and this is where I would have some disagreement, let's say, with the current schemes. And this is where we almost got stuck with the card model. And the question I keep asking myself every time I am asked to enter my 16 digits, that I say, why does it actually exist today? So why does it exist? And I think that is one of the questions that we never talk about. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the elephant in the room, and everyone is avoiding it. So when you really think about why you have that 16 digit, it's because Frank McNamara invented it in 1949 with Diners Club, and it had 16 digit, it had full name, it had expiry. The only thing it didn't have was CVV, and that came around when the internet came about. And I think when the internet innovation hit, the cards infrastructure wasn't, let's say, synced up with that innovation in a way, so it kind of lagging in that sense. So I think WeChat and Alipay almost answers that question, saying, well, if you don't have cards, you just go to that. And I agree with the adoption part, that once you have an adoption, an ecosystem where a lot of people are there, then it just becomes, everything else becomes a feature that you add, and that becomes a great enabler. And in the current markets where you build a wallet here and wallet there and trying to kind of force it, it's a much harder journey as well. So that I recognize as well. So I think this is where we need to focus on it. But all I would like to do from where I sit as Beam and one of those wallets is that at least recognize that this card 16-digit concept, and now we make them virtual as well, that we are not creating true innovation around it. We are kind of digitizing the problem in a way. It used to be physical, and now it's digital. There's a term for it now, it's phygital. So what I would like to focus from our perspective, if you take an industry such as retail, where there is everyday spend, so there is grocery, there is cafe, etc., you interact with these users on a daily basis, and perhaps that's the place where you can put some incentive for people to kind of go into those digital economies, go into those wallets. That would be an interesting angle there, and that's what we are trying to do pretty much with our vision. Yeah.
Just to follow on that, and that's for you, Pankaj. So Serdar is very much bothered by the 16 digits and the expiry date. Is it that hard to overcome with all the innovations that you're bringing?
So again, let me first start by saying that even MasterCard classifies itself as a payment technology company. In fact, recently we actually had a rebranding where we have dropped the name MasterCard from our logo. So all the new branding that you will see, we don't even use our name. So the idea is, I think we're all following the same North Star. We want to create an experience where the customer can make an absolute frictionless and secure payment anywhere. Mm-hmm. So there are three elements here: experience, security, and ubiquity. It has to work everywhere. So whether 16-digit numbers are the heart of it or not, I don't think, I could probably say it for the industry. We are not sort of obsessed with the idea of preserving and championing 16-digit. The reason why you still see 16-digit number, because there are practical considerations. Just imagine today around the world, just take a guess how much money is actually moved by the schemes. MasterCard alone moves $6 trillion annually. And we do that at managing fraud at under 6 basis points. The engine that powers MasterCard today is capacitized to handle close to 40 billion transactions per second. Each transaction can be decisioned in less than 130 milliseconds. Right? This is capacity. This is ubiquity talking with security and an acceptable experience. And all the ecosystem has invested around it. The banks have invested around it. The merchants have invested around it. Ideally, we would like to see consumers getting even more and more better experiences. And while it may not be directly visible to Serdar, I can tell you that we have seen a change in our data. Today, in most markets, in the emerging markets, more transactions are happening over e-commerce than card present. Okay, this is a change. Within e-commerce, my maximum number of transactions are actually something that we would call invisible payments, where the customer does not interact with the 16-digit card number. My biggest number of transactions in most markets are the likes of me paying for my iTunes or my Zomato or Uber, what really is my interaction with the 16-digit card number? It is reducing. We have brought in products like remittances, where there is no play of card number at all. So I understand Serdar's frustration. I can assure him that we as an industry are partners in it. We don't see it as a threat. We don't see ourselves as guarding something that needs to change. But it is a process. There are a lot of people involved. We need to understand the kind of technology coming, the kind of role that technology will play. And as a scheme, we are responsible for keeping everything safe. That is our primary responsibility. So when I look at everything, we are still very proud of managing an entire ecosystem at very, very low fraud rates. Whatever innovation we bring, that will be a heart of what we are doing.
Totally understood that customer safety is the primary concern. I see people want to interact. Alberto and then Serdar. And then I have a question for Dr. Deepak.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not going to come in run out and say I'm in defense of MasterCard, but there is a, or any card system. But for us as banks, it also comes back to the point of leveraging the infrastructure, right? If you remember a world before digital, when it was everybody would go to the bank and withdraw money, have cash at home and so on. The first transition state into a cashless society was when we got cards, right? And ever since, they have built a quite good infrastructure with point of sales merchants, and it's been around for so long that there's been, multiple technology companies building on top of this. So when I'm, for example, going into a Costa or a Starbucks, or I'm not preferring any coffee shop, but I go in anywhere and I just pay with my phone. I don't care if it's a 16-digit card that's hooked into my Apple Pay or if it's a wallet. What I care about, however, is that I can pay and the coffee shop has coverage. So when from a bank, if I'm going to build an ecosystem to reduce cash, I need to leverage these ecosystems. I don't want to jump on a wallet that only works on Costa but not Starbucks, or a wallet that needs to build its own infrastructure 10 years after the big rollout, right? So we're a little bit, it's not like it's a monopoly, but we would pick the big drivers because we have to see all these from a customer perspective, right? And we want to simplify for the customer. So we want to simplify for the customer and literally give him the network that has the most coverage. And that's also when it comes back to wallets. We didn't touch any wallet initiative until we went into the EDW one, which is literally 12 banks, with 45,000 merchants. Then it's worth it for us, right? So if we look at it from that perspective, that kind of explains why we're still using an old card model, because it's the best thing we have for now. So when you come up with a wallet model that can compete with that, you can probably have the right debate about why are we doing A instead of B. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate the response because it answers some of my questions, but I still think that having kind of this core and then putting layer on layer on layer, and there are so many layers now that I get confused about who is doing what, etc. And then every one of those layers potentially become another problem. So it's okay to say that we process a lot of transactions and there's infrastructure. That I get that as well. You can't abandon the ship and then jump onto something new that's risky and that doesn't work. But at the same time, I don't see any innovation that actually says we are building more dependency, more addiction to what we have, and that probably makes it harder to get away from it as we build more layers on top of that. So one thing that I noticed that came out, for example, recently in the last 3-4 years, is these buy now, pay later kind of products that basically they exist because of this problem. And they became billion-dollar companies because of this problem. So, and that shows that because by having one click, or you can get a BNPL account on the website within the same time that it requires that you enter the 16 digits. And and then you do a transaction, all of a sudden 20-30% uptake on the merchant sales, etc. These things, they are limited innovations. They are not addressing the core, but it shows that there is this thing that actually helps the retailer. And anything that in Europe, for example, they just last week they put the stronger authentication in place where every transaction has to be verified with an OTP. Now it's not just CVV, I also have to get an SMS or go to another app and do something else. So it's as if we don't want merchants to sell stuff. You know, yesterday I spent 15 minutes trying to buy an Emirates ticket, and it just went and back and forth. So it happens to me every day that I just want to see some innovation on that front. That's very much it.
And if I may just add, so you're not alone, so do I. I also buy Emirates tickets, and I also buy other things, and not, generally, yes, let's accept that, we want to see things get better, and I think it's a very good thing. You would not have been having this conversation 10 years back. 10 years back, it was a great thing that I don't need to walk into a branch to buy an airline ticket. So we are in the right trajectory. We are headed in the right direction. The angst that you have is the right angst, and all that I'd like to say is that the entire industry is working on it. And to Alberto's point, because there is an industry which has sort of worked on it for the last 50, 60 years, and there is established infrastructure, we need to look at how do we keep leveraging to make incremental innovation. That's great. And yes, there should be more to create revolutionary innovation as well. And that's where I think I tend to have a more optimistic outlook. I think, yes, we are having the traditional business, but the entire growth of API frameworks, the entire growth and focus around cloud hosting of data, okay, the entire discussion around fintech and in forums like this, why are we doing this? What does it mean? It means that we are headed towards innovation that will become more cheaper. My ability to test things will be improved. My time to market will improve when I work with fintechs, okay? As if you ask a bank or if you ask a MasterCard to build everything, we won't succeed. We're not built for that. Partnerships is going to help us do that. But in order to partner, I need to have some framework in place. So API frameworks are coming in place. Cloud hosting is coming in place. Regulations are coming together. Industry forums like these are actually helping exchange of views. So we are on the journey. Don't lose hope, I would say. And, we are all in the right direction. Okay? And things are getting better, and like I said, the main building blocks. Are we scaling up? The answer is absolutely yes. Are we managing the risk? The answer is yes. Are the experiences getting better? The answer is yes. Are we investing in the fundamental technology that will help us to innovate even faster? The answer is a yes to that as well.
Great, thank you. Dr. Deepak, a recurrent theme here is customer safety. Okay, and with all those new technologies coming online, what is being done to make sure that digital payments are safe, whether they are done, with a credit card, digital credit card, peer-to-peer, and not only the payment themselves, but customer privacy data? How are ensuring that all those critical information are being saved and give the customers the confidence that they can use those means confidently?
Okay. Let's discuss about the digital wallets so that we focus on the topic. Now, digital wallets can be hot wallets or cold wallets. Hot wallets are like you install it on a desktop or a smartphone, which are always available with you. So technically speaking, you require a smartphone to operate that. So that is prone to hacking, definitely. So, but the concept of digital wallet is it's a proxy wallet. It is linked to an account. That account, the data about that account, can be shielded. I can transfer a particular amount of money into digital wallet, spend that money. So that transaction is happening whether through, behind the scene, is it a like linked with the MasterCard, Visa card, or my account, whatever happens. So I'm using that proxy money, a wallet, where a specific amount of money I have transferred and I'm utilizing those money for my transactions. So it is on a smartphone or a phone itself. Now, if it can be moved away from the phone, and if it can be linked with your fingerprint, and that fingerprint readers are there across the stores, like retail outlets and other things, that will be a true success of digital wallets. Otherwise, it will be a technology which is there. Like I wanted to ask the question from Alberto and Pankaj. So technically speaking, the credit cards, right? Behind that is the authentication technology of MasterCard and the Visa. How it is different from the wallets. There they limit your total limit is there, credit limit is there, 60,000, 50,000, whatever be the limit. Here you transfer by your own. Apart from this differentiation, what is the other differentiation that holds? Yes, you can say blockchain technology, but MasterCard, I was hearing, they're also investing in the behind the scenes. There are a lot of tech firms they have acquired to implement those technologies. So don't you think like an organization which is a startup, which is coming up, like Paytm also is one of the organizations, or WeChat we discussed, how you will be able to cope up with such a big technological giants which are already invested and they have a lot of transactions, as rightly told by him, it's a trillions of dollars which are transacted over them. And if we see a startup, for them it's going to be very tough.
So, if I understand the question is what is the differentiation between wallets and cards?
Yeah, means differentiation,
So, I mean,
technical differentiation we know. But
I would say all companies today, including banks, are becoming technical product companies, all right? I mean, I ran digital startups in the first IT bubble. I now work at the bank, right? So, 20 years later, we're now sitting debating kind of, does the wallet work with AI better than MasterCard, The answer is, it's the same, right? So as a bank, what we're trying to do and what all kind of innovation labs or innovation focused or even digital transformation focused units globally, whether it's bank or not, are focusing on is trying to see how new technology and new value driven by that technology can be adapted to your ecosystem, right? So if you have a wallet doing some machine learning AI, well, surprise, surprise, I'm doing it as well, right? And I'm trying to adopt it to my products, to my learnings, maybe to a risk model that I'm trying to solve. Maybe I'm trying to get some efficiencies in the back end, and so on and so forth. So I don't think there is anything that says, A is better than B. I think we're all on the same, it's like multiple swim lanes. We're all in the same race, trying to leverage technology to simplify, to, cut costs, to cut pain points, and any other kind of problem statements. And whether you're a bank or a fintech or techfin or whatever you're referring to earlier, I think there's enough capable people, especially in this world today, in all these different organizations, to actually compete with each other, right? The differentiation is probably, I'm a bank, so I'm a little bit more risk averse, right? You may see, I don't know, someone selling bikes on the internet from a hole in the wall somewhere. They can take much bigger risks in regards to digital identification and payments and so on than me as a bank. So we are always a little bit behind, but we're always looking and we're always trying to leverage. That's literally the gist of it. I don't know if that answered the question.
So the main point is, like, I got the answer, that differentiation in terms of customer point of view, it's a hot wallet or it's a cold wallet. That's the only thing which is there.
I don't think the customer really see that.
Correct.
I mean, we can, and this is kind of quite funny. I mean, I was listening into the other type of forums here and panels. We tend to, and especially in this part of the world, and I must say it's a global epidemic, that we tend to speak about technology first.
Yes.
We speak about AI, and the customer don't care. Yeah, the customer don't care. He just wants, he just wants to do the payment, and he's happy that when he does the payment, you remind him about something else that adds value to him. He doesn't care if it's AI driven, if it's a machine learning engine in the background that did it. He doesn't care if the workflow he just went through is a robotic driven one, or if it is 3 people actually sending a mail to each other. So, I think from a customer perspective, it's the same.
And I will also, I agree with that, and I think the key thing there is you have to solve a problem for the customer that they recognize that, it hurts here, and then you give them something that stops the pain, then you get adoption. If you don't have that, then Doesn't matter what kind of technology or whatever we build. And that requires a lot of effort, and that's an enabler. Without it, we cannot do it. But it always has to be all about the pain point of the customer. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Alberto, having said that, I believe you run an accelerator, right?
Yes.
Yes, great. So my question to you is, how do you best strike the balance between partnering with incumbents or fintechs? And how do you draw the line between partnering versus competing with those fintechs?
So normally I don't remember who said it on the panel, but there is technology companies that build solutions, and there are companies that own the funnel. Literally, we own the customer, and we try to adopt technology to realize value in the funnel. And what I mean with that is, I have, let's say I have 1,000 customers, right? A new technology comes out where I can sell something better to those 1,000 customers, so I will then adapt technology. So to answer the question, how do we, sorry, I got a bit, yeah.
You might opt to either compete or partner with fintechs.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we said earlier about who do I partner up with to get the biggest width of adoption, right? So we're partnering up with MasterCard because, again, they will help us cater to our customers. SMEs, like I said earlier, if I can use a lot of MasterCard products because the infrastructure is already there. I can leverage that. In the back end, I can then bring in a fintech to help me maybe slice and dice data, maybe slice and dice segmentation. Maybe,
have you done it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way we're setting ourselves up is, and this is why, for example, open APIs is so interesting for us. We're trying to set ourselves up so that we can look at the market as quickly as possible and bring in either a fintech or a partnership to solve our problem statements. So as a bank, we're trying to be technically enabled in a way that we can plug in anything that comes our way, and then be very certain about what is the problem we're trying to solve. And whenever anything comes up that is aligned with that, we will bring it in. Whether it's a partner, whether it's a MasterCard type of partnership, or it is a wallet type of solution, or some AI solution, or some robotic solution, but then we bring it in to solve our business case and kind of make money at the end of the day.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah. So is that also to do with, let's say, not being able to meet customers' expectations fast enough, so that's why you partner with them? Is that also the consideration?
Correct. So normally we use fintechs as augmentation of journeys. Okay. Yeah. So for example, we're not a super big bank, so we often get into the conundrum of like buying or building. Yeah. So I think that answers your question, because if I would build one of these fintech engines internally in-house versus I have an open API, I just send data to the fintech and I get the value back, that normally ends up in the favor of the fintech. So it literally means I can just leverage them, bring them into my ecosystem, and kind of get multiples of value. When I think I can build it myself, I build it. But more and more, you'll see partnerships as a driver. More and more you see, because we said it, fintechs are tech fins, right? They are driven by, they have a very narrow view of a certain technology. They know that better than anyone. Maybe they have a wallet that slice and dice that data really well. I'm not going to compete with that. But I can take that, partner with them, and use that type of model. Maybe I can apply that to my digital banking account. Maybe I can apply that to my multiple portfolio of other things. And by doing that, we also create an ecosystem of data flowing in and out and actually value being realized.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Last but not least, it's probably not the most exciting topic, but it's a necessary one. What would be the major regulatory amendments that would need to happen to be able to push this cashless wallet digital experience to the next level, in particular in the UAE? And that's a question to Alberto and the others.
Yeah, for me it's digital identity. I mean, I think anyone who's in the tech business trying to do any onboarding to any product know that we're running a little bit behind on, it's still kind of wet signature. I need to send someone out to sign, and if I don't have a signature, customers can literally come back and say, no, I didn't sign it, right? So whether you have a wallet or a credit card or anything, that is normally what's holding us back. And if you're looking at very modern cashless societies in Europe and US, they have some kind of bank ID or something that is normalized and I would say standardized. And you come back to that kind of WeChat environment where everybody's just leveraging that. So any new wallet coming up, any new neobank, any new whatever, they just use that bank ID. And you know, I think that can create a better synergy between fintechs and a better competition, because we're all kind of a little bit behind and slowed down by that.
Absolutely, that's a very well-known impediment. Dr. Deepak, is there any solution that is coming its way here in the region to solve this issue? Is there a willingness to adopt new technologies to alleviate that burden?
It's all learning. They're learning. I know that there's a lot of research which goes on behind the bank also. So they're into learning mode. A lot of things need to be developed instead of being outsourced. That is going to be your primary core activity. When you say you want to analyze your data, what's happening, like for anti-money laundering, you say KYC, right? You using your UAE cash and combating your financial terrorism. All those transactions which are happening, the solution lies inside the transaction. You need to learn those transactions, and having such a big staff analyzing that data in an offline mode, they want a real-time way that the transactions can be analyzed. So the solution is that the banks have to adopt fast. They need to get into those behind-the-scene technologies. Front-end, the technologies are already there, like which will leverage the faster transactions. Behind-the-scene technologies, algorithms, all the things, they need to work very hard on that.
And there's, of course, the authorities' willingness to accept new solutions.
Yes, yes. Authorities want this only, means they don't want the things should be like the banks should thrive. That is the way. The employment should increase. That is what the authorities want. And at the end of the day, all those anti-fraud and all those things, fraudulent transactions should not take place. This is what is the requirement of the authorities, and the banks should comply to that. So that is the way what the authorities want.
There is also some regulation now as well that, I mean, we're looking forward to 2020 with UAE Pass and how that will shape kind of digital ID, and I think 2020 will be very interesting because of that kind of change in regulation.
That's definitely something to follow.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. I completely agree with Alberto that a lot of the, a lot of things will become simpler if consumer onboarding with a digital KYC is enabled. UAE Pass seems to be a step in the right direction. We're really excited to see how it evolves.
Serdar, is it an issue you also face from a fintech perspective?
Digital IDs?
Customer onboarding, is it an issue that you face?
For, you mean the digital IDs?
No, for...
No, I think basically I agree about the comment on the digital IDs, that I've noticed that I live in the Netherlands myself, and you have a national ID card, and pretty much signing up on everything is 5 seconds, and you can open a bank account digitally and off you go. So in that sense, it's good to have it. And I think the credit bureaus, everything is actually tied to it. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. And so before we leave the ground to questions, is there any closing remark on your end? Gentlemen. Great. So the floor is open for questions, ladies and gentlemen.
Table 1, and we got the far table there as well.
You have a mic?
Yeah, it's going.
Hello. Firstly, my thanks to you. This has been incredibly informative, and I think you gentlemen have done a great job, so thank you. My question actually comes back to something you all spoke about, which was around digital identity, and one of the ways that would increase some of the adoption, be it of digital wallets, be it of new ways of transacting. So What other countries have done a really good job around digital identity?
I grew up in Sweden, and they have a similar kind of social security system as the Emirates ID. So everything is hooked into an ID, 16-digit number. Well, it's literally it's not 16-digit, but it's a number, right? That is derived by your date of birth, and and they have literally digitized that, right? So there's something called bank ID in Sweden. And we look at it over and over again because that ecosystem is very, very successful. That ecosystem is very in the forefront of cashlessness. And there's tons of great competition with banks that are derived by, well, if you have a bank ID, you can have a regular bank, but then just, use your bank ID on your phone and you can use that to identify yourself. So I can go to any government setup, right? I can look at my tax, my driver's license, my fines, anything, and just log in with that system. And I can use it to log into my banks. I can use it to add new things, new products to my bank. It's literally end to end. And that's then generated what we referred to earlier as that system where people just invest in and keep on investing. So it's super safe because everybody has tried to hack it, right? And everybody's tried to build on top of it. And it just becomes the norm. And when digital identity is sorted, everything else is just very simple because I know who you are, eKYC is done, I know that I know where you live, your taxes, your credit bureau so it's very simple to do decision in principles all the way to a mortgage, right? Because I know you down to your core. So I would say Sweden and Bank ID, indeed.
And I would add something that basically if Klarna has taken advantage of that very well, and they were able to spun up a business really fast once they figured out their business model, and they used the ID to get through that as well, so that they didn't have to link cards, etc. in the beginning, that kind of at the end, so that was a big success.
The shortest possible follow-on question. We all have an Emirates ID, right? So the data exists and the identification exists. What do you think is the current inhibitor of the UAE or Dubai getting us into the space of a digital identity?
Regulation. Because,
thank you.
So we have tried many other solutions, right? Because it's not just a UAE pass, or it's not just there's multiple entities of government that are actually doing different things, right? So we have EIDA or EIDA, which is Emirates ID, I don't know what the A stands for, authority. And we've been trying to do kind of digital KYC where you read your EIDA card, your ID, send it to them, get some biometrics in. We literally try to hack it, not hack it, but kind of patch it. And it gets stuck in different regulatory, units. It could be EIDA itself because they don't understand it, or it could pass EIDA, but then the regulation still states that you need a wet signature and so on. So the problem is, unless someone dictates that this is the standard, normally it's regulation that says thou shall not need wet signature anymore, right? But you need X, Y, and Z, right? Whether it's a combination of UAE pass and some kind of API call to, 2 or 3 or different, But if they say this is what you need, everybody will come together and just execute it. And until you come to that point, we're all a little bit like headless chicken, right? Because we're trying to solve it, but I'm probably doing it one way. You may be solving it a different way. Different banks are doing it different ways. Some are trying to do eKYC with blockchain and sharing. Others are trying it via different government unit and so on. And until it's standardized, A, we won't be able to share the same standards. And B, we're just going to, probably spend a little bit too much money with less kind of outcomes.
I'll just sort of add to that. So another country which I find quite interesting is, and it'll actually go right back to what Alberto just mentioned, the fastest integration of digital ID into financial inclusion, of getting people bank accounts, has actually been the Aadhaar ID in India, where more than 300 million people who were never banked were banked in a matter of a couple of years. Between 2 to 4 years, you had about 300 to 400 million people sort of suddenly having access to financial services. So that's a great example of how do you get consumers onboarded with a digital ID. But the other part, which I think is more relevant for the UAE market and which is probably where the Sweden example is more relevant, is that once you've got this data, how do I make the sharing of data easier and how do I make it more interoperable? And there, I would sort of just make that point on regulation a little more clearer, because let's not simplify it. There are a few things involved. There is, of course, the technology. There's also the fact that, EID is one organization, the central bank is another, and then you have the overarching regulations to drive it together. So, yes, probably it's, it's a process. And I'm sure that, when we get to it, a country like UAE, which is not, very geographically spread, we would be very fast adopters. And we've seen this with a lot of technologies. UAE has been pretty good at adopting technology.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. I think we have one more question right there. We'll take one last one. Okay, we've got two. We'll take the last two questions. Corner there, and then table 3.
Thank you, gentlemen, for a very lively discussion. My question really is about war on cash in countries where cash is king and where there is the parallel economy and cash is really there to stay. And I'm talking about places like Kenya where they have M-Wallet and other places where where we said China skipped the whole carded aspect of payments and moved straight to the wallets. So maybe a question to Dr. Deepak and Pankaj. What is being done in markets where it's not as advanced as we are in the UAE?
Okay.
And also maybe if telcos have a play there.
It's a very interesting question. Like in many countries, the cash is still used and you go out of the airport and you just need to keep on distributing the cash. Now, it's all about governance. The solution lies in the governance, that how you want to govern your country. And in the cash, like the solution lies over here. A lot of things can be eradicated, like especially the corruption and all the things from those countries if the cash is not used. So the solution to those countries is definitely it's a public-private partnership that needs to come in, where somebody comes in and says that I'm going to change the full infrastructure of the country and financial component, and I will charge this much transactional amount, and I will ensure that the things are cashless, and it will eradicate many things, including the poverty in those countries.
My view, basically, look, a lot of these countries, you've got data getting cheaper and smartphones becoming more accessible. I think that's a great trend. And even in countries that you mentioned, I think that's the first thing I would look at. How well is the proliferation of digital technology, and especially the cost of handsets and the access to good data. If you've got these two things in place, then I think the next important thing is exactly how do we simplify a customer onboarding experience, and that's where, if the governments are investing in digital identity, and not only just identity as where UAE is right now, but linking this digital identity as a basis to open a financial account and reducing that friction. I think that is a very, very important starting point. Then there are other things, I think people get it, like if you've seen in Kenya, M-Pesa picked up. Why did it pick up? Because there was a genuine need. It's not a given that people like to handle cash all the time. Yes, there are a few people who want to stay in the shadow economy and they're happy staying that way. But there's a very big chunk of people who just want to keep their money safe and they don't have the good options. So I think it's going to be very use case and very market specific depending on how the ecosystem is in place. But I think mobile-led with a good digital identity and association with a financial account would be a very good starting place to start eradicating cash circulation.
I'd like to add something to that as well, because I am originally from Turkmenistan, and it is the country that has the most cash. So basically 4% of the population is banked, the rest is unbanked. And so I haven't been there for a long time, but that's where I'm from. But I would like to add a couple of things there, because it's a very good question, number one. I recently traveled to Azerbaijan and I found out an interesting behavior. So every time people's salary come in, so it's a fully banked, the country is banked. Everybody receives their salary on a bank account, but on the first day, they withdraw all the cash out the next day because they don't trust the banks because of what happened. Number of banks went under in 2013, 14, etc. Then they take all the cash home, put it under the pillow because that's where it feels safe. Then, which is really weird behavior, that when they need to pay a bill, they go to these little machines that where you put the money into the wallet, this machine that puts the money into your wallet, and then you make the payment, but they feel they are in control. So the question there is, it's a trust problem, and the only way to reverse that is by offering something, well, you don't trust me, I trust you, has to be the model where that you basically, the Central Credit Bureau, etc. That's one way of doing it. The second thing is that if you look at countries like Germany, we would have thought, 80%, 90% card transaction. That's not the case either. It's actually 60 or 70% cash economy. And when you go to the question of why that's the case, you find the issue is tax avoidance. So people don't, because once cash becomes digital, I pay more tax, I become less profitable, etc. So, and that fear is there. Especially small business owners have that fear, and the only way you can overcome that fear is by saying, hey, if you go digital, all your data becomes used, and then you will actually be more profitable, or the tax that you pay will be offset, etc. And this is incremental profit that you get, etc. So these are just two things. And then the question around Kenya being banked, or there is a different story. If there is no bank, you go from cash to mobile easy, but if there is a banking in between, then there is this in between, like the Azerbaijan case as well. So there are multiple considerations for each market, and I would say each market needs a separate study on approach to get some uptake.
We can do one last one, sure.
There was a gentleman at the front.
Very interesting debate. The only thing which I wanted to add it up, and just a small question, that we have heard, like the question what the gentleman has said, that your Emirates ID is the one identification which holds everything. And we have heard a lot that Emirates ID is going to have your insurance. So future can be like this one, that you can have all your driving license, insurance, your banking information, and everything is going to be on one card. And that one particular is going to be your identity for anything. And another addition is, like, there are certain governments or the developing countries where the government has to pitch in a lot of money for the poor people to just to subsidize them with the money for their health or otherwise to support them. So that can be something which can be linked on, and this interface can help it up in the next future.
Emirates ID card integration is always a project which is under study. Like, we are already working with the government on as a research project. Definitely there's a lot of things which needs to be worked out. Definitely, like how the different banks and different banking authorities will integrate, because there are two different systems that need to talk to each other. Definitely the APIs can be built. Through the APIs, they can always do a transaction. Like if I swap my Emirates ID card on a retail outlet, so there, first of all, if it's Emirates ID card, it goes over there, it links with my credit card or whatever be the card, authentication comes from there, transaction executes, it's successful, then the things can be swiped, then the transaction can be completed. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of research to be done, a lot of activities that need to be carried out. It's possible and it should be there, but it will take time.
Can I just add as well? I think the earlier debate around Africa is actually a good example when if you start with nothing, you go much faster, yeah? Because Africa went from no infrastructure straight to 3G,
correct,
yeah, straight to mobile payments, full stop, right?
And a very, very vibrant second-hand resale market for phones. I mean,
Correct, yeah.
It's very vibrant. Yeah.
And then you can see how that then easily can be just all the others, insurance and so on. They can probably just hook onto that and say, well, I've identified you, you have, and it's literally three moving parts. The problem comes when you get into this modern world where all entities of government have funding for innovation, all try to run And I'm not just saying that that's the case in UAE, I'm saying globally, right? Even in Europe, we have the same problems where you have, even back in the UK, when you have the NHS try to solve something and someone else try to solve something, then you have the HMRC, and it just goes on and on and on. And the difficult part is always going to be kind of the cost of decision, right? Or the cost of merging. Say you have one Emirates ID with another unit, and how is that going to integrate and so on. So we are actually on the back foot because of the adaptation of technology in so many multiple streams that now, if we're going to standardize it needs to come together. Yeah, and I think that is a challenge, and I think that's to kind of tie into some earlier answers on the panel. I think we need a little bit of steer from someone a little bit higher up to say, you three come together, then teams of fintechs, banks, whatever, follow this path. I think that could be a definite catalyst and accelerator for all these initiatives running, whether it's wallet, war on cash, anything that has got to do with digitizing UAE and this region.
Great.
I think we're out of time.
Thank you to our panelists for this very informative and engaging session. And thank you to the audience for also being engaged.